So you've probably been on social media before. If you're watching this video, I assume that's probably how you found it. Um, and you've probably come across a variety of different, I'll call them opinions when it comes to training. And some of those opinions are naturally contradictory, yet both of them seem to yield some type of result. So let me explain by that. You might hear people say barbell lifting and traditional weightlifting and exercises. That's not the way to go when it comes to becoming a better athlete. And they might say, well, only body weight exercises or these certain types of movements are the way to do it. And this is, the best way to train. And then there's obviously another cohort that might say traditional barbell lifting is the best way to get better as an athlete, the best way to get stronger for your sport. And then the other movements might not be something they incorporate. Yet both groups and parties seem to get some sort of result. And it's really important that when we think about what works, we think about it in terms of percentages. Like, how well does it work? Nothing's going to work in absolutes. What's that Star Wars line? Only Siths think in Siths, if I can say that. Wow. Think in absolutes, meaning that there's always some gray area. And the way you can think about it is basically in terms of food. I like food, and you might too. And by no means is there one type of meal that you think is the absolute best. It's probably, I would rank it an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 or whatever it might be. Meaning that there's some aspect of it that they could have done better, yet the meal is still good and it still suffices and you very much enjoy it. The same thing kind of happens in weightlifting and strength conditioning and all walks of life, to be honest with you. The idea of an absolute makes things very difficult and it brings up a lot of division amongst different groups. Specifically, we talk about strength conditioning. You have one group that might be very dogmatic in the way they do things, and another group that might be very dogmatic in the way they do things. And both groups seem to get results, but they don't appreciate the areas that they're missing out on. So what I mean by that is whenever we do something, let's say we go and lift weights, it is going to help us to an extent get somewhere. Let's say in the perfect world, if I had the perfect workout, every single thing I did in that workout would yield a result. So we'll say 100%. Now I might do a squat workout. I might get results. I might run faster. I jump higher. But it's not going to be 100% the best return on my investment. That's just a fact. I might get 60% of the way there or 60% of my return. And that's really good. Now, I might never squat and I might just run sprints and jump and do body weight stuff. And I too might get 60% return. That's really good. In both situations, we got return and we got better. But what happens because both individuals are getting results, but we're not addressing the why of those results, we then have biases towards that. And again, I go to social media because I was on there reading some stuff and they're talking about people who just blindly follow other people. It's kind of funny. They call someone a sheep or whatever because they're a follower. And it's the idea that critical thought doesn't mean you just blindly follow someone else. And what I mean by that is if you understand the why of something and you understand it should almost be called like critique thought, not critical thought, because you're almost trying to critique the thought you have because you understand that it's imperfect. And the more we can identify those imperfections, the better we can say or see areas that are lacking and try to improve them. It's almost like if you were trying to lay bricks and build a building, we want to inspect every aspect and layer to make sure the bricks are perfectly laid, not because we want to show off how good we are, but we want to make sure there aren't any holes and gaps amongst our mortar that we place down to lay the bricks upon, so we can have a very sturdy foundation, because we want to find any gaps that exist so we can better ourselves, versus saying we get results and this is the way to do it, and then saying, oh, that's not the way to do it, and then blindly following one group or another group. So the idea of just having a contrarian opinion doesn't make you a critical thinker. And this is something so often that is very cyclical in strength and conditioning and apparently the rest of the world. It's that when we realize what happens is if we do the strength conditioning example, we lift and we do barbell squats and we get 60% of the way there. We're like, wow, we got better, but look, there's a 40% gap. Instead of saying the 60% is beneficial, we look at the 40% and say, ooh, strengthening, this method must be wrong. And so because I've realized that there's a gap or inefficiency, I'm going to move elsewhere and I'm going to do this other exercise and these other movements. And maybe you get some results. And then you say, this is incorrect. This is correct way to do it. Now we have developed some means that is effective, yet it has inefficiencies. But because we want to sound like we're intelligent and we want to have our abilities be a scarce resource because we are doing something different and it's because it's different, we think we're smarter. We develop what's kind of like a contrarian belief. And then lots of people just blindly follow the contrarian belief because that too is supposed to be a means of critical thinking. But in reality, it's kind of the same thing. If you were to just blindly follow popular belief or blindly follow the contrarian belief, in either situation, you're just blindly following something. And so when we talk about critical thought, again, think critique. You want to critique and you want to understand and you want to try and figure out what is lacking so we can put it together. And you see this so often in diets. It's probably one of the most common things in fad dieting is that we have some aspect of a diet that's very beneficial. Maybe it's like, cutting out carbs because people typically eat lots of junk food from carbs and they get some benefits, or maybe it's the carnivore diet or the keto diet. And they do some aspects of extreme dieting that's kind of polarizing to one end of the spectrum. And then next thing you know, they go, this person's incorrect, and they see no issues with their means and no inefficiencies, but they'll point out all the inefficiencies of something else. Again, just blindly following what is like the contrarian opinion. And we get into these cycles because we don't ever actually bother to understand why. And we don't understand very well that things don't work in absolutes. Our brain and subconscious might recognize an inefficiency, or I should say deficiency. It's not there. It's lacking. It only gets a 60% return on the weightlifting part. And we realize we could get 40% elsewhere. But then mentally we say, it's because it's all wrong. We have a nuanced subconscious evaluation of something, and we realize that, this thing is not getting a full return. And then we have an absolute summation. So we take that thought and then we summarize that thought and package it and say, that's absolutely incorrect, which is kind of funny because it almost are like being nuanced to recognize that problem and then being very absolute to solve that problem, which in of itself is kind of a dichotomy, I guess. So you can see this constantly throughout. And as a consumer of information and someone who trains people, and we're just trying to do the best we can, it's really important to try and understand what we do wrong. I always say one of the most intelligent people are not those people who know what they know. It's who know what they don't know. Because you don't know something and you don't know that something, then you can work on trying to understand it a little bit better. And so when I think about strength conditioning, when I think about working out, when I think about, dieting, when I think about all aspects of life on social media, whether it's you go as far as some whatever you do on Twitter and the political or social or economic aspects of it, just remember that when we're trying to develop a better understanding of something, the more you understand something, the more you're going to realize there's gaps in that information and there are deficiencies. But just because there are deficiencies doesn't mean that the previous bits of information are not useful. It doesn't mean that barbell back squatting is bad for you, or doesn't mean that lifting weights is going to make you less athletic. It just means that there might be other options you can incorporate as well. And the more you understand the why of certain things, the more you can understand how these aspects overlap with one another. So blindly following the contrarian opinion is not a means of critical thinking. It's just it's probably the same thing that you might critique if you blindly follow the contrarian opinion and then call other people like a follower of sorts because they believe the common belief. Well, you're just doing the same thing, but towards a different, you're following something different. And it's the same aspect, just blindly following something versus being critical in the thought. Because when you're critical about something, you evaluate the issues with that something. So that's really important. I wanted to share that because that foundation of thought is what's going to help you navigate anything, be honest with you, when it comes to trying to understand something. But if you're talking about certain aspects of weightlifting and strength conditioning, it is the underlying thought of beginning to investigate information and knowledge so you can put together some sort of support argument as to why you do things, but also some support as to why you might want to explore other areas as well. So I appreciate you all listening. As always, I hope you enjoy. Let me know if you like these types of videos a little bit different than maybe some of the weightlifting stuff, just specifically talking about means and methods. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Enjoy.